What's the plan? Double on everything?
We'll show them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have parental classes on
Yeah.
how to do homework. Alright. You ready?
Ready?
Sure.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you and welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Attleboro School Committee, Monday, June 12th, 2017. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. We're going to start tonight with our spotlight event on highlighting student travel, and I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Regan.
Thank you, Chairman Withers. So tonight we have several teachers and chaperones and students here that participated in 3 of the trips that we had this year. One was the inauguration trip to DC with the high school. The second trip was the grade 8 Washington DC trip, and then also our first middle school international trip from Rome to Athens. And so what you'll see tonight is that our students are receiving direct experiences that will help to continue to inspire them to be lifelong learners, and I hope that you will be able to see that tonight, especially because of their excitement and the level of engagement that they had through all of their experiences. So for the first group, I would like to bring up Miss Katie Rigo with the high school.
Hi,
Welcome.
everybody. Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you so much for having us here. We're really happy to be able to share the amazing experience that we had back in January. Okay. So first, I'll just tell you guys a little bit about the trip. We took 23 students and 4 history teachers to the presidential inauguration in Washington, D.C., and we were down there for 4 days and 3 nights. So we started planning this event, about a year before, and the students signed up, and we did a lot of fundraising to get down there. Obviously, the highlight of the trip was being able to attend the inauguration. The students really, I think, gained an insight to the political process, and so we had a pretty evenly divided group in terms of, kids who wanted to be there just for the experience, kids who were really happy to be there for Trump's inauguration, and kids who were, slightly disappointed at the outcome of the election. But I think that being able to see the process and be a part of history and being able to witness the history really meant a lot to kids. And so this is about a half hour before the inauguration started. In the back sort of corner, you can see the Capitol building. And, we woke up really early that morning and walked, I don't know, Colby, how many miles?
About like 12.
Like 12 total miles to get there. So it really took some blood, sweat, and tears to get there, because of all the road closures and where buses were allowed to get near. There was probably a more direct way. So in this picture, even though we were all exhausted for having woke up at 4 a.m. and walked 6 miles to get to this point, I really think it was an amazing experience for the kids to be able to kind of see, how democracy works in action. However, that's not the only thing we did on the trip. So the rest of the time was spent, really bonding and being able to go through DC. We spent a day going and sort of splitting up by interest, and the kids were able to go to different Smithsonian museums and really, get a chance to get a feel for, what historical things lie in DC. And then we did a walking tour at night of all the monuments. And so this is our group at the Lincoln Memorial. And the nice thing about our trip is because we were smaller, they paired us with a high school from Mississippi. And so our kids got to experience everything, not only with just kids from Attleboro, but they were able to see, the perspective of kids from a different state, from a radically different part of the country, and kind of see how they sort of viewed the things that we viewed, and really talk about how, our perspectives are, depending on where you live, might be a little bit different. And so, this is us on, I think, the last day that we were there. We did sort of a daytime walking tour of the Capitol building. We went to the Supreme Court. We went behind the White House. They wouldn't let anybody in the front of it. But I think that, above and beyond being able to just see history, I think too often kids kind of get in that rut of thinking of history as like this thing that doesn't matter, and this thing that they don't have any influence on. And then we were able to go and kind of, see our history, but kind of, be able to have this relevant experience where it really allowed the kids to become more engaged in the importance of the political process. And then not only that, 23 kids is a good size, so we were able to really bond over those 4 days. And I think it was an experience that kids really got out of their comfort zones, really, were able to broaden their horizons and make really lasting friendships. So now this is Colby Goyette. He's a junior at Attleboro High School, and he came on the trip.
Hi, so I'm Colby, and I was one of the students on the DC trip. From the trip, I actually learned a lot about the political process and what it's like for the president to actually be inaugurated. I didn't understand at first how much there was to it during the whole process, and the handing off almost of the presidency. And along with that, not only did we do actually seeing the inauguration, we went to the Smithsonian's and stuff. And I learned a lot more about the Air and Space Museum. I learned so much just by being there and actually being able to walk around and have kind of control over what I was looking at. And that's one of the things I actually liked the most about the trip, is actually being able to control what I wanted to look into and what I wanted to understand more. And that was one of the most valuable things to me. But I think one of the biggest things I'm going to take out of this is actually the whole point of being able to actually see that history actually happens in front of us, like Mrs. Rigo said. It kind of inspired me a little bit more to be a little bit more politically aware and understand what's going on in the Senate, what's going on in Congress, actually understanding what the president really does instead of just seeing this as our leader. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn, you have a question?
Yeah, just I'm really excited and curious about the interactions between the students from Attleboro and the students from Mississippi. And I think one of the great opportunities for travel is to get to talk to people with different perspectives, different life experiences. Can you speak, I don't know if you had a chance to talk with any of those students and any of those big takeaways that you had from that conversation, and is that something that we should be focusing on to try to link different groups of students?
I think that was actually a really strong point in the trip. At first, a few of us were kind of skeptical seeing this other group of students from Mississippi, which is very different from Massachusetts. And by actually talking to them and understanding where they're coming from and why they're there, we got to form more of a connection rather than they're just voting for Trump or we're just voting for Hillary or anything like that. But we were actually able to understand where they're coming from and what they view as what to do with politics. And along with that, I found it as more of this moment to be there's a lot of people that we don't get to talk to on a daily basis. And actually being able to talk to someone in Mississippi, I actually formed some pretty good friendships, and I still talk to them now, actually.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
So next we have the middle school grade 8 DC trip. Miss Melissa Mandeville.
Hello.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Melissa Mandeville. I'm the 8th grade teacher at Brennan Middle School, Social Studies. And today I brought with me two people that came on the trip with me, Neil Bowie from Brennan and Maddie London from Brennan.
They went to the right.
Okay.
Yep. There you go.
So I organized the planning of 70 kids, 74, and then give or take 70 ended up showing up. 70 kids from all three middle schools. with 7 chaperones to go to DC. We were there for 4 days and 3 nights. We visited everything. It was a very busy few days. The Capitol building, the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, World War II, Korean War Memorial, the Holocaust Museum, the Smithsonian's. We did a ghost tour at night. We did a cruise. We just had a jam-packed 3 days. 3 days, 4 nights. And one of the experiences that stuck with me was something Neil did, so I wanted him to explain that to you guys.
Hi, I'm Neil Bowie. The DC trip was fantastic. One of the highlights of it was I was actually able to find a relative in Arlington. It was my great-grandmother's brother, a Mr. Richard Walsh. He was in World War II and the Korean War. Besides finding that, the trip overall was fantastic. We didn't just get to see DC as a whole, but things such as Alexandria, which is very cool to see, as it's not DC, but it's something much different, an older colonial city. The history surrounding it is very cool. The ghost tour, we were able to learn a lot, especially from our guide. Besides that, we had the Vietnam Wall. I wrote a letter to Richard Gilden, who passed away in the war.
A resident of Attleboro.
So a few people wrote those, I believe 7. I'm not sure on the exact number. But besides that, there was also, like what Miss Mandeville said, the cruise, which was very fun. It wasn't exactly a learning-based thing, but we had a great time. We met we met some people from other schools. Everybody had a blast, but it really tied the 4 days together. There were so many things. It was hard to see everything, but we managed to see it and more. Mount Vernon was also something that I'd like to bring up. It was fantastic to go see it. The house is magnificent, so is the property. DC itself is just a beautiful city, and it's really great to see everything there.
And then Melanie, that's you.
So my favorite part was definitely the Vietnam Memorial, to just honor the people's lives that were lost there. And I wrote a letter to a Herbert, and we put it right in the bottom. And one day they might all be in a museum. And I also really enjoyed Mount Vernon as well. It was amazing to just see where our first president walked. We walked the same paths he did. And this trip was an amazing experience to make new friends, get closer with our classmates before we go off to high school, where our relationships are very important, and we learned money management skills. When we went from different stores, we had a certain amount of money we brought, and we learned to use that.
That's George Washington planted that tree.
1789.
Any questions?
Mr. Larson?
Does the world seem a little bigger to you now?
That's what I think they enjoy the most, is getting like independence and again, like you said, I didn't even think of that, managing money for 4 days.
I think seeing some of those monuments, and especially like Arlington and some of the other cemeteries, really gives you an appreciation that it's very difficult to grasp through a book. So it's great that you guys get out there.
Yeah.
Mr. Quinn?
Were we able to, or did we try to reach out to our congressional delegation before heading down there?
Did not.
I think went down a couple years ago for another trip, and granted schedules don't always line up. You saw a lot of great things, and that might just be a nice opportunity for a photo op in
Yeah.
the future, because I was looking at the big photo of the students, and it's great. Yeah. But really awesome trip, and thank you for organizing it for the students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And next is Miss Doreen Baracco from Brennan. She has the Grace and Rome trip.
Hi, everyone. I'm Doreen. This is Maya Alho. She is my student in 7th grade. Hi, Mr. Larson.
Hey, how are you?
So we started an international travel program in the middle school. I had been doing international travel for 4 years with another organization, so I thought it was about time to introduce it to Attleboro. And we chose from Rome to Athens because of the connections to the 7th grade curriculum. So anyway, I don't know how to use this. Is it like that?
You got it.
Oh, very good. And now how do I... Dr. Souza, the principal at my school, put together a great, I don't know what you call it, like an intro to our trip. But I don't know how to. Do you know how to open
Just
it?
click right on the link. There you go.
Oh, there we go. I'm a Luddite. Okay, and then I'll talk after this. So funny. So this trip was more than, can we get that off? This trip was more than just about connections to the curriculum, but it was also connections with each other. And at first, yeah, I mean, we've got 3 middle schools coming together, right? So we have to bring these kids, maybe they know each other, maybe they don't. So it started, it was there was a little reluctant at first. They went with what they knew at waiting at our gate, but eventually they got to know each other, and before you knew it, they were breaking out the cards or whatever else they were playing with. So they began to make those connections with each other, and then right before we were getting on our flight, they had established some pretty solid friendships. By our first day in Rome, they all knew each other, and we got to stroll through the Piazza Navona. These connections were really important in some. You can see this one venue. This is the Vatican. Just getting through the crowds, we all knew each other at this point, and certainly the blue T-shirts, which some of our students are wearing, that helped as well. But as I said, connections with each other, with faculty, with parents, with students, and just making friends. That was one of the a subcurricula, if you will. That was really fun. Connections to the curriculum, that was the easy part. So here are students standing in front of Laocoon. He was the Trojan prince who tried to convince the citizens of Troy not to allow the wooden horse into the city gates before he was struck down by Athena's serpents. There they are again in front of Pericles. So, it was pretty exciting actually seeing, the real artifacts that they've seen, in class before. And here we are just goofing off. We had great guides at all of our sites. I know, right? And connections with the guides, with parents, with teachers, with the handsome dancers at our Greek evening, and with each other. It was just a really wonderful trip. And I brought along Maya because she was one of the students, and I thought she might have a few things to say about the trip as well.
So during the trip, we were given the opportunity to see so many iconic and historical cultural sites, but my favorite was at the Vatican, which highlighted some of the highlights were St. Peter's Basilica and the Vatican Museum in Rome. Being an artist myself, I appreciated the overall architectural and designs and works of art there. I thought that the night ferry we took to separate going from Rome to Greece was very beneficial for us because up to that point, most of the kids stuck out with their original friend groups. Between the limited space on the ferry, it forced all of the kids to hang out together and make more lasting and unlikely friendships. Some of the memorable parts on the trip in Greece were when, on cultural night, on the last night of this trip, we spent an entire evening of watching Greek dancers and eating traditional food, and we were invited to join a dance circle on stage that ended in spiraling among other tables around us. At the height of the dinner, we smashed plates, which was a traditional way to celebrate the end of the party. We all bonded over the MOSAT that night and we created so many memories during that time. I found that history wasn't the only thing we learned during this trip. For the students especially, we had a lot to do on like staying on topic, on time, being in the center, being where we were supposed to be after we visited sites, making sure we got to places on time, making sure we were staying with the group, keeping our money on budget and not running out of anything in the middle of the trip, staying healthy and being was a major priority as well, since we were expected to be responsible with our actions.
So there you are.
Do you have you been bitten by the travel bug? Do you want to go anywhere else?
Oh, I love traveling. I would love to go again.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Larson?
I just, similar to, I think any of these trips where we can get the kids out and I'm going to call it the real world, outside, and expose them to what is really out there. I know somebody who went on another trip with somebody, and she hasn't been the same since. So.
Took his daughter last summer. South Pacific. Wow.
Yeah, they were gone for 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and
We're really far away.
again,
Yeah.
a trip that they change people, and in a very positive way. So great to see that we're doing it.
Mr. Quinn?
Building off of what Mr. Larson said, I think what's really interesting is that while each of these trips has some sort of curricular relevance, I think in the broader picture, these trips are about relationships and becoming more of an adult.
Yeah.
And so one of the themes that keeps popping up is, managing your money and being able to navigate, a different space and be able to do that. And then interacting with people with different perspectives in ways that, you couldn't otherwise. And I think that these trips are crucial for our students, not only just to be lifelong learners, as Assistant Superintendent Regan said, but also to be, global citizens who are able to participate in, in a time when we need more productive dialogue with one another. You're learning these lessons at an early age, so keep up the great work and keep up the efforts.
Thank you.
Mr. Geddes?
Thank you all, students and teachers, for coming and showing these, sharing your experiences with us. This really puts into perspective the need for experiential learning. Going back to what Colby said, that he was able to control what he learned and how he wanted to learn it. Arts, architecture, history, managing finances, independence, personal responsibility. Not all of that can just happen in Brennan or in Quello or just within our buildings. So giving students these opportunities is critical. And thank you for demonstrating why it's so critical. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, tonight we have Miss Nicole Lane. She's going to explain some of the future travel opportunities that we have coming.
Hello. So we have some upcoming trips. We planned out so far the next 2 years, but we are kind of thinking even further beyond that already, but this is what we have set in stone already. So the 8th grade will be traveling the next 2 years to Washington, D.C. And there's also an England and Scotland tour and a grand tour of Italy in the next 2 years that students can sign up for in the middle school. And then as far as the high school, we're planning a Philadelphia and New York City trip. We're hoping to try and offer at the high school level at least one domestic and one international trip every year going forward. So the Philadelphia and New York trip will be the domestic trip next year at the end of March. And then there are 2 international opportunities next year. One, the Italy, France, and Spain trip is already full, but there are still spaces available in the Germany, Poland, and Czech Republic trip. That's a trip that I'm running, and it's connected to a Holocaust Studies course that I teach And then in 2019, there's a Grand Canyon trip, and which will be the domestic trip. And then there is an Ireland, Scotland, and England trip that's already full. So there, and with a wait list, so there have been talks about trying to possibly offer another international opportunity for students that are still interested, but we're not able to get into that first trip. So.
Mr. Geddes?
And anyone interested can just get in touch with their teacher, or is it available on each school's website?
Yep, I believe there's a website as part of the district website for travel, but yeah, you can also get in touch with the principals, or I don't know, Doreen is in charge of the middle school international trips, and Missy is in charge of the middle school domestic trips, and then whoever the new assistant principal is at Attleboro High School will be in charge of, or the high school trips.
Awesome, thank you.
Currently, right now on our website, all of the trips are listed with contact information. So it's under the community tab, district travel.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Look forward to hearing about these trips next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Regan.
Thank you.
Moving on to our business agenda tonight, the first item for discussion is just an MSBA update. The first item to report is simply, and it was in the paper, so I don't think it's going to be news to anyone, but the SBC met last week, and at that meeting, they did vote unanimously to choose option 4B as the option for the community. It is the new school option that this committee already approved about a month ago, so they did follow through on our recommendation, and that'll be brought forward to the state later this month. And then the second item on this update, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Sawyer just to report on the upcoming meeting on June 21st.
Thank you, Chairman. We have someone from the State Office of Campaign and Political Finance coming down to explain the rules that govern a ballot question campaign, so that members of the community who wish to organize a campaign in the future will have a strong sense of what we can and can't do. And it'll also help explain what school employees can and cannot do as part of that campaign, because I know there are very clear rules, and the school department has every intention of being on the right side of that as we move forward and move into module 4 of the building process with the MSBA. So that's on June 21st at 5:45.
And there is a flyer for that, and it's been distributed already on social media. I think that, as I'm sure, like myself, you've gotten questions as to what the community can do or community members can do to get involved. And I think the answer has been that this is really kind of the kickoff to the community involvement, and this is to have the state come down and tell us what we can and cannot do, and starting a ballot question initiative and campaign. So this will kind of be the starting point. Mr. Quinn?
Is the meeting being recorded by Dole ACS?
We will be inviting them.
Excellent.
Mr. Lars?
Where is me?
The mini auditorium at the high school. So that's off of the principal's lobby, not the front door.
Any other questions? Mr. Geddes?
Not related to this event, but just to the process in general. Do we know where the process stands with figuring out each residential tax implication? I know for me that's still the most
Prevalent question you get,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, I know that City Hall is working on it with their bond counsel and the treasurer. I think they're closer. I don't know how close they are, but I don't know if Superintendent Sawyer can speak to any more specifics as to where they are with
Well,
that.
they're looking at, my understanding is they're looking at all the variables and trying to find the best approach so that the impact will be as little as possible. I mean, obviously, no one takes the proposition of raising taxes lightly. And so that work is being engaged with a real thoroughness, which I think is part to explain why it's taking this long.
And I think, and it's a mistake I made, but I think a mistake that people can make is assuming it's as simple as, finding the formulas that are online and plugging the information in and getting your answer. There are different questions, there are multiple bonds that have to be floated as part of the financing, and what are the interest rates going to be X amount of years from now. So there are various things that they're looking at, what the number is going to be. So they are working on it. I think obviously everyone wants it yesterday, but I'm sure that we will know as soon as they have the answer.
And I think just to go off of that, because someone that approached me this weekend about it said that numbers are being floated on social media, or different parent groups are starting to share numbers. So it's important to note that the city has not released anything yet, so don't believe anything you're seeing.
Correct. None of that has been vetted, or you can't assume any of that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Quinn.
And building off that, Mr. Geddes, I think this is going to be a number that we want to nail on the first try. I think it's something that we don't want to get caught off guard or float anything until we're, things really begin to crystallize. And I think patience is really prudent, particularly as we're, while we're getting closer, we're still quite a ways out, and we don't know how things are going to shift. So I think patience, while it can be challenging, it's much better to be, do it once right and accurate than, try to rush to, just get it out there.
All right, so that is the MSBA update, unless Superintendent Sawyer, is there anything else that?
I would just add that as part of the process, we received feedback on the submission that we made to the state back in March. And as part of that feedback that we received, we had to make some revisions to our ed program. I mean, basically, there were certain areas where we needed to add some more detail to help justify the plans that we're developing. So at our next meeting on the 26th, Mr. Rooney and I will be presenting the revisions that we are going to be requesting is approved by the committee, so that we can include that in our submission to the MSBA as part of the next step at the end of June.
And you can get that to us in advance of the meeting, so we'll have time to.
Absolutely.
It's obviously a lengthy document, so everyone has time to review it. Yeah, Mr. Geddes?
And when is the next school building committee meeting?
21st, right?
Yes.
Oh, it's coupled with the presentation.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have the proposed school committee meeting schedule from July 2017 through August 2018. Superintendent Sawyer, anything you wanted to?
No, I would just say that this proposed schedule was built off of what we did this year. So we sort of took what we did this year and plugged in what that would look like on next year's calendar, and that's what you have before you.
Well, we can obviously amend it or add special meetings as necessary, but I thank the superintendent for putting this together. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, we have the proposed subcommittee meeting schedule for September 2017 through June 2018. Again, Superintendent Sawyer, anything
No,
you
same
wanted to
thing.
add? The proposed schedule was circulated with your materials. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. And again, thank you, Superintendent Sawyer, for putting that together. And you will handle getting that posted on the website for the school committee as well?
Yes, I will do that.
You will do that personally, right?
Yes, of course.
Next, we have the minutes from our May 22nd, 2017 meeting. Again, these were circulated with your materials. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have our consent agenda. Motion to accept the donation in the amount of $3,600 from the Feinstein Foundation, broken down as follows. Studley Elementary School, $1,800. Willett Elementary School, $1,800.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Pursuant to the Chestnut Hill Studio LTD contracts dated February 2014 addendum, motion to approve $1,848 to directly benefit the students of the high school, broken down as set forth in the memorandum to the committee dated May 22nd, 2017.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $514.36 from Ahold USA, also known as Stop and Shop A Plus Rewards Program, to the Hill Roberts Gifts donation line.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,500 from the New England Behavioral Services to Mrs. Martin's third grade class at Willett to purchase technology in the form of iPads and/or Chromebooks.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $1,194.12 from Ahold USA, aka Stop and Shop A Plus Rewards, to the high school for general use.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $70 from Men's Warehouse to the class of 2017.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $550 from the Rebecca Lynn Whitefield Foundation for senior dues.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $300 from Northeastern Savings Bank to the Attleboro Community Academy for graduation support.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to accept a donation of 30 Dell flat-screen monitors to the district from Castle Booze Associates of Foxborough, with an estimated value of $1,350.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and that concludes the consent agenda. Moving on to subcommittee reports, Mr. Larson.
Yes. Finance Subcommittee met on June 7th. Mr. Furtado took the committee through the monthly reports, and we spent the time discussing how we saw the end of the year wrapping up, and we will be ending the year in the black, which is encouraging. At this point, I'm going to invite both Mr. Furtado and Yvonne to come up for the rest of my report. Thank you. As part of the information that was sent out to everybody for the meeting tonight, the subcommittee approved the restructuring plan that was brought forward to the subcommittee by the special ed director for the special education department going forward. And it was great to see a plan on paper that made sense and I could understand, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
At this time, before we get into the motion, I would open it up to discussion if anyone else in the committee has any questions of what was handed out. Mr. Quinn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Medeiros, I was just curious about the current caseloads for each of the team chairs versus what the new proposed caseloads would look like with the reorganization.
So at the high school, there would be no change in the current caseload. What we're doing is, so currently the team chairs all have another duty besides being a team chair. So they're either a teacher, they're an evaluator. So it basically would even that out. So while they would be picking up another school to be the team chair for, most of the school that it's aligned with either doesn't have, it's only just inclusion, doesn't have any special ed programming. So basically they're trading out a teaching role or whatever their role is to be a full-time team chair.
And for each team chair, about how many students will that individual service?
Depends. The high school would have the most, about 200.
For that individual team chair?
Yes.
And what about the other?
They're running about 120. They would run, if they picked up a full, would be 120 to 150, depending on where they're at.
And do they have any sort of administrative support to help with the facilitation of, all the paperwork that goes involved with this? Or are they running pretty much solo?
They do initials, reevaluations, reconvenes, manifestations. Our actual special education teachers run all the annual reviews.
Okay.
They're in charge of the paperwork. They write the IEPs. They're basically, what the team chairs do is file the paperwork. They review the IEP for compliance. They make sure meeting notes for initials and reconvenes. They would submit. They would invite the meeting invite. They would send that out. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it just seemed, and we know from various meetings that the special education department does an awful lot with really limited resources, and that's a theme that's come on. And I think it's important just noting those are pretty big caseloads, and I thank the effort of your staff to do the best with the resources, meet the needs of the students. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Withers.
Thank you. Your memo and your materials indicate that the plan is cost neutral, which I think is important, especially, unfortunately, in the climate that we find ourselves in now. I know that'll be one of the questions, when people hear restructuring, will be the cost associated with this. So could either of you explain, how this plan is cost neutral and, what the changes are?
So the plan included a chart that showed kind of head count to head count across, and that's why we brought it through finance, because wanted to make sure that the committee broadly understood that this was not a request for additional funding. This was to use existing resources, redeploy them, recharge them, and reorganize how the services are delivered.
Mr. Geddes?
During the subcommittee meeting, I mentioned how appreciative I was for the restructuring. And in addition to it being cost neutral, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the big struggles with special education in K to 8 is that transition from elementary to middle. And so having a team chair that works with partnered neighborhood schools is critical to easing that transition for the students and their families. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Mr. Quinn.
Can you speak to a little bit about the shift in terms of the role of the out-of-district coordinator? We're reducing that role a little bit. What perpetuated this change, and can you just walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So it's been, I spent a lot of time meeting with the different coordinators, the team chairs, the principals, parents, really looking at the structure. One of the things with the coordinators, each one of them kind of had a different role. So for the out-of-district coordinator, a lot of that work was a team chair role. So they're the team chair. They run the annuals, they don't do initials, but reevals, reconvenes, manifestations. So when we looked at that, we have about 50 kids out of district.
Okay.
Most of them are in the surrounding. We're a member of BICO. Most of the kids are placed in the surrounding. There is some travel, but not as much as what we would think. So a lot of it is contained within this area. And looking at the caseload, it's about a 3-day a week, about a 0.6.
Okay.
And that's how that came about.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Mrs. Skills.
I also thought, well, first I appreciated that Mrs. Medeiros took her time and you got to know this district and really put thought into how she wanted it to be seen and how she wanted it, to redo it. But also, we are going to be gaining some teacher in some of the schools because, even if it's just a 0.4 or whatever it is, at least we will have some more teacher support out of this too.
So what we were able to do is when we started to streamline the restructuring, we were able to shift some of the resources back into our schools. So if you look for the psychologists, for example, we have 2 schools currently who don't even have the equivalent of a 0.5. All our schools next year will have at least a minimum of a school psychologist 0.5. So we have Hill Roberts right now and Willett that don't even have that and have some pretty, intensive social emotional needs. So that's been a nice change. We'll see some increased support services based on student needs at Hill Roberts and at Willett again. Based on that, Thatcher, for example, in ELC will gain a 1.0 school psychologist, which they don't have anything equivalent to that right now. Plus, it's the same person versus the way it's done right now. It's between people, which makes it difficult based on that. So we were able to shift, with kind of the streamlining of it, shift some resources back into schools based on needs current needs in the building right now.
Other questions? All right. I'm going to entertain a motion to accept the structural and financial restructuring of the special ed department brought forward by the special ed director.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we had one other conversation that I'd like to share with the full committee. I'm going to ask Mr. Furtado to use his elegant words instead of mine, so it comes out correctly, about the repairs that we're trying to do to some of the buildings.
I want to apologize to the chairman because I was supposed to get him a discussion.
Sorry, it still would have come out better if you said it.
feel
So.
miserable. You know, we've had a heck of a process trying to get the vendors lined up to do the capital projects, the boilers, the air conditioners, and the work at studies for the facade. And we were just kind of celebrating a finance that the purchase orders were finally entered that day. So we have purchase orders in place. You know, the committee may be aware we were hoping to do a lot of this work over April vacation. That's very
It's
long,
June.
long gone. So we were able to again finally get it going. For the people who are very patiently waiting to see actual activity, you'll be seeing it very shortly. You know, the process was a difficult one, and part of it was driven by a change in state regulation back in December that I was not aware of that had occurred, and so it forced us to go through it twice. And the second time was a little longer than the first for a lot of reasons. The only kind of bad news is we put Studley out twice for that contractor work, and both times we got no bids. So we're trying to figure out a different way to get that work done. Part of it may be we just buy materials ourselves and hire labor on a contract basis and have it done that way.
That's for the facade?
Yeah.
Unless anyone has any other questions, that's the extent of my report.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Next, we have open forum. Is there anyone who would like to address the committee at open forum? All right, that'll close open forum. Next, the Attleboro School Committee will convene an executive session pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2 and 3, to discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with union personnel and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining. As an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee. The school committee will not reconvene in open session. Motion?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Tyler?
Yes.
Mr. Larson?
Yes.
Mr. Withers, yes. Mrs. Scales?
Yes.
Mr. Geddes?
Yes.
All right, we'll take a 2-minute recess and reconvene in executive session.